Now, summer is well and truly upon us, and hopefully that means more of us can have time to relax with a good book or 10.
Something we never get to do. The Grattan Institute has released its summer reading list for the Prime Minister, and its Chief Executive, John Daly, is with us now. John Daly, good morning. Nice to see you again.
Good morning.
We had this chat last year, and this is a cheeky idea. The Grattan Institute decides that it knows best when it comes to the Prime Minister's reading over summer, and you select the list for him.
Well, we certainly make a bunch of suggestions, and I note that at least one of the books he took away on his holidays last year was one that was on our list too.
OK, so you're scoring a win there.
Well, we're certainly chalking it up.
OK.
Just before we go through the books you choose, what do you look at when you come to compiling this list every year?
Well, we look for things that have got something to say to people who are involved in policy and politics. We look for books which are really well written. They have to be a good read, and they have to have been written more or less in the last 12 months. So those are our rules. You've got to have rules for things like that.
Do they have to be Australian?
No, they don't have to be Australian. We're, I guess, very clear about the fact that, a lot of the time in Australian policy, you can learn a lot from what's happening elsewhere in the world, and so we've in fact got some that are from overseas.
And let's kick off with that. The first one is written by a Canadian politician who his career in politics didn't end all that well. Take us through that one.
Well, that's Michael Ignatieff's Fire and Ashes. So he was a professor of sort of policy and so on at Harvard. He was a Canadian by birth. Had a family that can, perhaps be summarised as being the sort of royal family in both directions of Canadian politics. The Men in Black came knocking and said, the Liberal Party in Canada is in dire trouble. We want you to come and run for politics and become the leader of the party. That's what happened. He was a man of extremely high ideals, someone who certainly had a lot of good policy ideas. But it would be fair to say that, well, there was a lot of ashes.
He wasn't a great retail politician, as
they say.
It
wasn't a great retail politician. Politics is a very difficult, not always very nice game, and he was on the wrong end of some pretty unpleasant stuff and wound up, crashing and burning his party pretty much obliterated out of Canadian politics.
James Brown is on the list as well.
Yeah, so that's coming back locally. So James was a soldier in Afghanistan. He's written a fantastic book called Anzac's Long Shadow that looks at the way that we talk about Anzac Day and the way that then makes it really difficult for us to have sensible conversations about defence policy today.
He tackles what he argues in that book, and I think it's a ripper of a read, our obsession with Anzac Day at the expense of paying attention to the struggles of more modern-day diggers.
That's absolutely right. He calls it Anzacery. And one of the really bizarre things about Gallipoli is that when you stand right back, what it demonstrates is it doesn't matter how heroic you are. If your generals and your captains make bad strategic decisions, you will lose the war. And ultimately, if you're going to fight a war, you're in it to win it. And he points out that one of the problems it's created is this kind of myth that it's all about the common soldier, and yet really what modern warfare, as much today, if not even more so, requires is really good strategy and tactics from the officer level.
It's about leadership, as it is in most things in life.
Some tips for the Prime Minister, perhaps.
Indeed.
If he takes up this book.
Well, as he points out, actually, one of the real problems is that there's really few Australian politicians who have any experience in the military, far fewer than, say, in the United States. And consequently, they never ask the tough questions. Do we really need this piece of kit? Are we running the army the right way?
Well, Jackie Lambie, I guess, is there to redress the balance.
Well, she's at least one.
Yes. Noel Pearson's essay is part, let's have a look at the cover of that, is part of your selection as well. I would assume that if the Prime Minister has not read this, he would have at least have had a chat with Noel Pearson about it, might know something about it.
I would imagine so.
Yes. I mean, this goes to the issue of, of recognition, which of course is part of the Prime Minister's campaign to get the first Australians recognised in our Constitution.
That's right. And what's really innovative about Noel's essay is that he's very much trying to work out what are the arguments, almost irrespective of your political position.
Yeah.
What are the arguments if you're a Liberal, if you're from the left, if you're from a Conservative perspective? Why is it that from all of these perspectives, recognition might be a good idea? And of course, Noel's one of Australia's truly great thinkers in terms of thinking through questions of identity and culture, and he brings all of that to bear on this problem.
Next on the list is a Joan London book.
Oh,
John.
yes, I can't wait to read this. I've been waiting for her new novel for ages. Tell me it's good.
It's just beautiful. That's the first thing you have to say about it. As I said, all of the books on the list have to be really good reads.
Yes.
And this is one you pick up the first 10 pages and as I did, we were trying to work out what to put on the list, and we were trying to find a novel, and I was running around Sydney supposedly doing something else, and I managed to pick up a copy from the bookstore because someone had suggested it, read the first 10 pages. I couldn't wait for the next meeting to be over. And it's
that good.
It's that good. And it's all about... we forget that this happened so recently. In Perth in the 1950s, people were still getting sick with polio and being crippled by it. And it's all about 13-year-old children in this polio institution in Perth. That sounds pretty grim. It's actually not nearly that bad. But of course, one of them, the central character, comes from a migrant family. And it's all about, in many ways, the assimilation of that migrant family into Australia. Well, not just their assimilation, how they contribute as well, bringing some of what they've taken from their homeland and brought to Australia.
Now, I'm very happy to say that the last book on the list is Annabelle Crabb's book, The Wife Trout. She was on our program talking about it. This has set another national conversation going about the gendered roles of men and women in families and how we really need to be freed up from the straitjacket of that, of who might be the husband, who might be the wife.
That's right, and I guess one of her key points is that men are as in much of a straitjacket as women.
Yes.
The thing that I think, though, we've got to stress about this book, because it sounds like a very dry subject, potentially.
No, it's very funny and charming.
It's hysterically funny.
Yeah.
The description of Annabelle trying to finish the book and at the same time write the holiday diary for Chiquita, the kangaroo from childcare, which, of course, winds up being the highest priority in her life, so that her child's not the one in childcare whose parents were too busy to do a holiday diary for Chiquita. It's fantastic.
Yep, and it just explains the stresses that all often come down on the woman, but they don't have to. So it's a nice list.
It's a very diverse collection. So what happens, John? You send this list into the Prime Minister's office now and hope for the best?
That's absolutely... Well, we
send the books.
We send the books.
Oh, good, OK.
And hopefully he'll read at least a few of them. And the other one we didn't mention is we've also put an article on this year, Larry Summers' article about Thomas Piketty. We were slightly tempted to put Capital in the 21st Century on the reading list, but I note it is the second least
read book. That's right.
Or more accurately, least finished book on Kindle.
Why? Because it's dense.
It's this big and this thick, and it's a great idea. It's sort of basically the history of Capital.
Right. I bet you've read it.
No.
I have read it.
You haven't read the whole thing.
You have
not read the whole thing.
I am one of the very small number of people who has made it to the end, but I've got to say it's not something I'd recommend for the summer.
Can I say, it's sitting on our bookshelves at home.
Well, go and read...
It's not on my
the spine
bookshelf.
entirely uncracked.
Well, go and read Summers, and in 9 pages you get most of it.
Beautiful. Sounds like a nice idea. Do you ever get a thank you note back from the Prime Minister after you send the books?
We usually do.
That's very nice to hear.
That's very nice.
Hey, always good to see you, John. Thanks very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.